Alright, time for another graphics.com video presentation. So, kind of a review yeah, of what's I've argued in the last week or two. I guess I really haven't done a review video in a while. Specifically, a standout video, I suppose, would be the one called energy equals mass moving a speed. uh, Speed is a scalar. Velocity is a vector. Yeah, they keep saying crap like that. And it's frankly, I mean, one of the biggest points you can understand about how the universe functions is understanding that there's no multiplier for energy. It always comes down to how much mass is it, okay, and how fast is it moving. And that's the only source of energy. And that in atoms, that energy is stored in the pressure, the motion, the jitter between electrons and protons in a system where those charges are balanced. But it's just about the ability to things being in a circumstance where they're, if liberated, if the pressure is somehow removed, that they're going to move, like in gravity, where there's streams of energy. Well, inside atoms, there's streams of energy, and electrons and protons, depending on what stream they're in, can be pushed. And that's it. That's all there is. There's just these little pieces of stuff, matter, being forced to move by a force, okay, by a pressure that exists in the universe. That wasn't that simple, but anyway, it's very simple. What it's not is just some idea that somehow light things moving fast have more energy than heavy things moving slow. They don't, and it's just that things react differently to the speed of an object. The faster you can put the energy into a system, the more disruptive it's going to be to the system. So if you can, it's like you're going to shove something in, even inside of your, poke your body with something. If you did it really, really slowly, you wouldn't even, your body would react in little tiny increments and adjust to the new circumstance. So if I could poke an arrow into you over a 10-year period, it's like your body wouldn't even know you got stabbed by an arrow, except for the arrow, but it would adjust. But if you do it in a millisecond, it doesn't adjust, and it tears and rips apart, and you bleed and all that kind of stuff. All right, not a perfect example, but it's how you apply the energy that makes for differences in what we see the energy do. But the energy shouldn't be defined as a quantity based on how fast you're applying it. It's like applying temperature to ice. If you apply a high temperature quickly or a low temperature slowly, it makes a huge difference to how the ice fractures and melts. Anyway, so, and the rest of the videos are okay. Okay, but yeah, that was the best one. So I guess I'll play some of these. I mean, it starts sort of since the last video with the Brozo providing another one of his cheap, crappy, poorly done experiments. I point out the huge glaring flaw in his pretty much faked experiment, in the sense that the results aren't what can be understood to be what is expected. What if you do it right, how things will turn out. If you do these experiments right with weights and springs, the fact is that springs, like levers, like pressure vessels, they will do the conversion. That is, they will convert a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour into a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour. They'll do something that should be impossible, in the sense of by the conventional theory, the 1/2 mv squared, it's making free energy. But by momentum, it's just converting momentum in one form, lots of matter moving slow, into a few pieces of matter moving fast. And that's perfectly reasonable and logical, and you really shouldn't be able to break those rules without substantial and credible evidence. So on the subject of credible evidence, there is a little bit of a Professor Lewin look to this video. So we'll play this one. So the little magical clay blob is on the sled. I've pointed out how these two carts can't possibly be in a 1:2 ratio of mass, because the carts are cut specifically to be twice as big, and to be twice as massive it would need to have twice as many added features, and it doesn't have twice as many. It has the same number of weights, it has the same number of springs, it has the same number of attachments, and it's missing the blobs of clay. So clearly it can't be twice as massive, and clearly that's why the experiment came out the way they fixed it to come out, the way they rigged it to come out, in this illogical way that somehow you can subtract momentum, that somehow if I shoot a bullet this way, I can undo the energy in the universe by shooting another bullet the opposite way. When no, all I'm going to do is double the energy in the universe. But anyway, so let's pick a random spot and play a little of this and see what I said. Oh, I have to make sure I have these volume settings correct. Blah 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 blah. All these little logistics. It's like saying if I shoot a bullet this way and I shoot a bullet. Oh, that's ironic. Oh, jeez, it's just so perfectly ironic. So I was giving the examples of how they should be able to figure out how this theory doesn't make any sense, because I could do modifications to a gun and just make a gun with, an open barrel where you put the charge in the middle and 2 bullets fly out, and we're supposed to believe that gun has 4,000 joules of energy. But if I do the opposite and make 2 guns that sit inside of each other and fire that charge of explosive, I only get 4 joules. So in one case I get 4,000 joules into the universe, in the other case only 4 joules into the universe, and I used exactly the same explosive. I mean, it's so glaringly illogical. Should I have to make more arguments than that simple argument? I mean, what's the counter argument? I tried to even contrive counter arguments by doing the Veritasium mocking videos, but I couldn't even imagine what you could say that's rational. I mean, how you defend against this logic, that it just can't be the truth. It can't be possible that the explosion only has 4 joules of energy in one circumstance and that somehow it produces 4,000 joules in the other circumstance. That can't be understood to be sensible. So why do I have to keep making these videos? It's just so ironic. That way, from a gun that has 2 barrels. Yeah, it's just really, I really didn't have any idea that was going to happen. It's just kind of funny. My brain apparently does work because it clicked on the right argument to make at the right time. But anyway, see what else I said. Bounce off. And that would be the product of the experiments. Now, the only difference is there's no spring here. So, alright, so I was talking about the Professor Lewin experiment. So you get this, you start with 100 joules of energy, and somehow, well, let's say momentums, pounds of pressure, weight, and somehow you can produce 130 pounds of weight in one direction and 30 pounds of direction in the other direction, and that isn't free weight. That isn't free movement in the universe. So you have 100 pieces of movement. You do this magical experiment, you get 130 going in the direction you started with, So that's 30 free in that direction. And then you have 30 more going back the other way. And they think that makes sense, that that could be a physical truth. Now, certainly Galileo, Descartes, and Newton would say that don't work that way. That ain't going to happen. And again, in my opinion, it only happens when you do the experiment wrong. Because every time it's done right, by accident, so I show that Professor Lewin does the experiment accidentally when he's doing an experiment where the carts are supposed to stick to each other, and they don't. They bounce off of each other, which is the same experiment as this one. And the results don't show any free energy being created. No momentum problem. You don't get 130 going forward and 30 going backwards. What you get is 70 going forward and 30 going backwards. You get the 100 you started with. And this is it's as glaring and as obvious as, say, the Mythbusters video that just sort of shows there's no kinetic energy. They don't find it when they're doing experiments, and they're not even looking for it. Clearly it doesn't show up, and it's only when they're trying to find it that they find a way to find it. Okay, they find a way to make it come out the way it's their theory says, and it's just not the truth, and the flaws can be understood. So I'm just showing the glaring image that there's no way to logically say this second cart is twice as massive. It just doesn't have, it can't be described that way because it just doesn't have the pieces that make that a reasonable assertion. You can't reasonably argue that there's any probability that this cart weighs twice as much as the other cart. It's missing too many weight elements. Hey, on your carts. Yeah. Alright, so again, this is the experiment that Brozo's attempting to reclamate. And so this is, he thinks it's the truth. He doesn't know anything about the math or the history. So he doesn't even understand that the formula he's trying to defend is where they take this Frankenstein thing. They do this, let's mate a possum with a badger. And, it's this perverse experiment where they're smashing two things together. So they try to smash momentum into kinetic energy theory. Two opposite answers to the same question. They smash them together, come up with this bastard child formula that makes no sense, that creates fake and phony and false answers. and he's defending it because he's too ignorant to understand the formula has no credibility. It doesn't make any sense on its face. Momentum and kinetic energy are not compatible theories. You can't believe in both and be reasonable. I don't think that's reasonable. Alright, boy, there's a lot of coincidences there. Okay, so which one was this? Yeah, it's further down. This one was further down than that. Yeah, that was this one. So yeah, we'll do some of this Jim Al-Kahari guy. So it's all of this fake physics is based on these broken fundamental foundational axioms. So they broke energy with this stupid kinetic energy nonsense, and that created all the particle and nuclear physics nonsense. All the accelerator nonsense just has to do with them equalizing equations where they have completely insane numbers. So they think because a small particle like an electron is moving fast, it therefore has these insane numbers of amounts of energy, when it doesn't have any of this extra energy, and you don't have to find an excuse to produce this extra energy or have products that produce this extra energy. So the whole invention of the neutrino, all of these things happened only because their equations didn't work, that they ended up with energy in and energy out that wasn't equal. So they had to invent little particles to be carrying away their energy or bringing their energy into an interaction. They either didn't have enough energy to produce the outcome, or they had extra energy in the outcome and they needed some excuse for where it came from. And that's how they invented all these extra particles. So that's all corrupt. And then you have the double slit experiment, which, this guy, I wish he was infamous for how he perverts it. So he's almost as bad as Dr. Quantum in kind of implying that, our consciousness is controlling the experiment, and, this kind of nonsense, in terms of making it, completely, overtly stating that it's a completely incomprehensible, there's no way to understand what's happening in the experiment. You can't give it any physical description. It's impossible, because it has to be this paradoxical bizarreness, so they can defend having this wacky theory that doesn't make any rational, logical sense, that somehow particles are sensing things and they're doing all kinds of sophisticated, complex reactions, that they're figuring out what the shortest path is, they're doing complex mathematics before they move. All of this nonsense that just, it should make reasonable people squint and say, what, I have to believe that? In my opinion, it's harder to believe than some simple, God theory. It's just such rubbish. And they just say, here's, an answer to a question you didn't ask. So they do math for questions that nobody asked, so nobody cares. Yeah, so their proof, this is the most proven math in the history of mankind. It proved a circular circumstance. They say there's 1 million joules of energy in a gallon of gasoline, and then they just go right around and prove it with exactly the same fake numbers. So they just contrive the numbers to match what they're looking for. They're not predicting anything real. They're predicting an abstraction they're measuring with their broken ruler. It's just a lie. And then they go on to tell us how we wouldn't have clothes and we wouldn't have running water if it wasn't for quantum mechanics. It's just a huge lie. But if it wasn't for believing in the woo physics. But all this trouble to say some words. I'm just talking about all the theater that has to go with science now. It's not, people just aren't interested in having a real conversation about the real circumstances and the real facts. It's all this production crap, and show you pictures and blah, 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 and pretend that's science when it's not. Saying something and proving something, it's just, there should be a higher standard to what you define as a well-substantiated argument, besides their own arrogance and production values. Well, it's well-produced show, so therefore it must be well-thought-out science. Those two are not connected.
Measurements, but
okay, so let's understand that they're never going to show us these brilliant predictions. So there's no point, that they can make predictions. Show me. Right, so they never complete any of this math. I've never even seen any physicist actually do Einstein's equations and actually show how it actually predicts the change in Mercury's orbit or any of those things, where they actually put numbers in the equation and actually solve the equation. They instead just show you how they derive the equation, how they convert the equation from this big long equation into a little equation, and then they say, I'm quite sure it's the right answer. Well, they never show it to be the right answer. It's just, it's like the two-slit experiment. They never really go out and measure the actual fringe pattern and see if it actually matches their mathematical prediction. Big shortcutty bullshit. Alright, so this is, in the video is a little description of the where Einstein actually becomes, a defender of the truth and argues with this spooky action woo physics, and him and other people create these thought experiments. Do you think the moon disappears when we're not looking at it? Schrodinger's cat. They're set up to be just almost just a mocking rhetorical statement, saying, what, are you stupid enough to believe the cat is superimposed, that it doesn't know whether it's alive or dead, that it's not alive or dead? What, are you silly enough to believe that? And unfortunately, the answer from mankind was, yes, we are silly enough to believe that. And it just demonstrates how this is really just religion, because there's no logical counter argument to those arguments, that this quantum crap is just a story you're telling us because we can't just plug in a microscope and see what happens on this subatomic level. So you're pretending the place we can't see, all kinds of ghosts and goblins and all kinds of mysterious characters exist in that space, and you can just make it up because you don't have to provide any evidence. So you can just assert it and claim, well, I can't prove it, but if I assert it, you'll believe it, right? Because I said so. And I'm wearing a suit, and I university likes me and they've decided to call me professor. Therefore, I know what I'm talking about. And people buy that crap. No, it's not even, quantum computing. It's what a big fake fraud. 15 years later, nothing. It'll never happen because it's based on an illogical theory that somehow there's a shortcut to answers to questions, and somehow you can avoid having to solve a problem. You can just get to the solution. You don't have to go through any of the process. You don't have to do any work, and you just get to the cure. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. The universe doesn't work that way. There's no shortcuts. You can't wormhole your way to the answer. Pathetic. Alright. Well, I guess I might as well play this since I clicked on it. Put the background back on. No, it's not enough. Yeah, that's just the end. Alright, so let's see. Which one will we... that was down here. Alright, so... the Brozo argument, I've already made those arguments so many times. Comments, probably okay. There's probably something in there that's good and useful, but we'll do some of this mass moving one because I think this is one of the better videos and kind of concisely getting to the point. Which is really accurate, and so this is a moot point. I'm not implying it, I'm stating to you overtly, yes, that the two mass half the distance on the lever will weigh exactly as much. Yes, really do. Yeah, I really have to make these assertions, like somehow there's some confusion somewhere, that people really think this isn't a direct, the scale is telling you the truth. It's telling you that a half mass moving twice as much is the same as the full mass moving half as much. That it balances on the lever perfectly. It's telling you directly that these are equivalent amounts of energy. They produce an equivalent amount of weight on the side of the scale, okay? It's an equivalent amount of pressure. How can it possibly be non-equivalent amounts of energy? If it's producing the same weight, the same pressure, how could it possibly be different amounts of energy? How could one possibly have twice as much energy if it's producing the same weight and the same pressure? It's ridiculous that I have to argue this with reasonable people. That they won't even concede. Like I said, they won't even concede, gee, this is a little bit strange, and somebody should really tease the truth out of this because this doesn't seem right. They should at least be able to say, this seems a little, yeah, this needs more poking at. But they want the poking to stop. They want any questioning to stop. They don't want a clear resolution. They don't want to earn a clear victory. They just want to pretend that they've already won things, and it's always going to be butter spread on bread. So that's a good analogy, but yeah, that's all there is. The energy is a stuff, and all you're doing is saying, how much matter do I have to spread it on? And that'll tell you how fast something's going to go. That's it. You got to push more matter. Well, then you have to apportion the money in more pockets. So it's just about, if you're running an orphanage or something, you're going to give out an allowance, and you got $10 to give out. Well, the more orphans you have to give the money to, okay, the less they're each going to get. But you can't change how much money there is. You can only change how much each piece of matter has. So if you can, get rid of some of the orphans, then the ones that remain will have more spending money. They'll have more to give to friction and give to other things in the environment. They'll be able to move more stuff with their energy, with their money. So I've tried to analogize. It does analogize very well to money. Okay, mass is a wallet, and velocity is the size of the bill inside the wallet. So the more wallets you have, you can have a lot of wallets with small denomination bills, or you can have one wallet with very high denomination bills. That's it. You can have a small mass going fast, you can have a big mass going slow. Same difference. Energy in the same speed of rotation. So I was just making the argument that this is, people keep trying to turn this into an angular momentum argument, and, so they don't understand the difference between a sphere spinning. Okay, there's mathematics for a sphere spinning, and obviously it'll have an r squared in it because, yeah, that's how anything spherical works. The r squared rule works with any point source. And point sources, you can understand that a single little point in space represents, and equidistant from it is a sphere. So if I take a line equidistant from it in all directions, I end up with a sphere. And so that r squared rule is a spherical rule. Any sphere will create it. So yeah, it makes sense for a sphere. And then if you have a flat disk, well, you have a similar rule, but only with one dimension. Only in one dimension is the volume increasing. So it's not a squared law anymore. And obviously, when you're talking about a lever, you're not talking about any mass in levels or distances or radiuses from. You're just talking about a single piece of mass in one orientation. And that's it. And so it's really just about how fast the one single piece of matter you're moving, how fast it moves. It doesn't really matter its direction anymore. It doesn't matter that it's circular. So angular momentum becomes moot on a lever because the lever isn't even in the experiment anymore theoretically because it's got as much mass on one side as it has on the other. But I've been through these arguments so many times. It's just amazing that people keep defending rubbish. It's not this. Okay, this isn't a disk spinning. Okay, obviously the pies would be. So I'm just pointing out, it's not a disk, it's not a sphere, it's just a mass and another mass, and they're going to move through space, and they're going to do it at a velocity. No, it cracks because it reaches a fracturing point where okay, so I'm just pointing out that now it's just about how you apply this energy. So if you can apply 2 joules of energy in a half second, or you can apply 2 joules over 3 seconds, and that depending on how you apply that energy, you'll get a different result. So I've used the karate guy breaking the piece of wood. And it's just a clear example. If he moves his hand slow, okay, with weight behind it, he won't crack the board. But if he moves his hand fast and he reduces the amount of surface he's hitting with the same amount of energy, he can force the board to crack. So if he applies the energy, gets the energy into the board quickly, the board will break. But if he puts it in slowly, the fibers will adjust and they'll be elastic and they won't break. Same energy though. You're just applying it differently. Clinical measurement of how much you weigh when you fall one. It's just like the bowling ball example. Again, the heavier ball moving slower gives away its energy to the pins less quickly because it hits a pin and the pin only leaves with the same velocity the ball is going at. The pin goes away at a velocity. The velocity had to come out of the energy of the bowling ball. The bowling ball is obviously now going a little bit slower and the pin's going a little bit faster. And the lighter ball, the pin leaves with more velocity because the bowling ball is carrying more velocity. And then there's the elastic effects that are built into what the bowling ball is made out of and what the pins are made out of, which means there's a little bit of a spring effect between them, which gives them a little extra velocity. A little stored velocity in the spring that creates a little mini explosion to give the pin a little extra velocity. But all the velocity has to come out of the bowling ball's energy. None of the pins move with a collective amount of energy that's greater than what the ball had going in. Meter. Alright, so what I have observed, and what I think, can be, you can sort of understand, is the fact is I'm arguing plainly that when you're stuck on the surface of the earth, there's no doubt about. Okay, so I'm pointing out how you can understand that this is just about weight and pressure and motion, and that even gravity is demonstrating that it's your momentum that's creating the dent you're producing in the ground, and the fact that the ground keeps pushing you up. You are in fact moving, sitting in gravity, and that's why you weigh something. It's because you are moving. You're compressing the spring. You're moving. So that's how you can see that you're actually moving, is that you can slow down the process of gravity by putting a spring between you and the surface of the earth. And just like Galileo used a ramp to show how gravity works by slowing down the process, you can use a spring and watch you move into the earth, okay, and compress the spring. It's showing you the process. And the fact is that gravity's doing it, at a vibration rate you can't see, but it's really happening. Your mass, little pieces of your body are actually moving in the directions. Some are going down and some are being pushed back up, and you can feel which ones are doing that. You can feel certainly the ones getting pushed back up. You don't feel the ones getting pushed down because gravity moves everything at once, so your nerves don't realize when you're being pushed in gravity. If you're free falling, you're not going to feel your atoms in your stomach or over here, you're not going to feel any differential. They're all going to feel like they're going the same speed. And the fact is you feel that as being abnormal because you're so used to the fact that on Earth, that's not how it works. Different parts of your body are moving at different rates because of your skeleton. Your skeleton is more likely to be pushed up, where your flesh is more likely to be less concerned about the immediate circumstances and jiggling. And that's why you feel gravity. It's because it's all you're feeling is the earth pushing back. You don't feel gravity pushing you down because it does it evenly. It pushes all of your elements at the same time, at the same rate. Where getting pushed back, the earth pushes you through your feet or through your ass. It doesn't push you evenly. It doesn't push each piece of your flesh the same. And it's so easy to understand. That's the truth. If you go by your sensations, you're not going to understand reality, because gravity doesn't going to allow you to feel when it pushes you, because it's not pushing your feet, it's not pushing your one side of your body, it's not pushing your flesh, it's not pushing you physically with atoms, it's pushing you with a force that doesn't worry about the outside versus the inside. It pushes all of it at the same rate. Shit. I mean, this is such important foundational physics, and it's just totally ignored by physics. The same amount of energy, but you can make the door break. Okay? You can fracture it. Okay, so just making a prisoner example or something like that, where you have your choice. You know, you can just figure out how much energy it takes to get something done, and then you can figure out, well, yeah, sometimes all I have to do is apply the energy different, and it works. I can just sharpen. I can put a arrowhead on my arrow, and it'll be more effective in penetrating flesh. It doesn't give it more energy. It just makes it more effective at doing a particular thing. But it doesn't mean it has more energy. Putting an arrowhead on an arrow doesn't give the arrow more energy. It makes a dramatic effect in terms of the effectiveness of producing an effect, but it has nothing to do with the energy, the total energy of the arrow. So you should be able to understand that. That's the only reason why some things look like they have more energy. Looking like and having aren't the same thing. Yes, the bullet looks like it has more energy than the recoiling gun, but it just looks that way. It's not the truth. Now, the end of the video. Okay. So I think that was the best out of the bunch, but whatever. Let's see if there's anything else here that's worth a peek. Comments. Strong forces. Again, I provide in my theory a pretty good explanation for why there is a circumstance inside of atoms that allows protons to get really close to each other. And if you just inverse the relationship, it would obviously make it possible for electrons to get very close to each other. And it makes it understandable how atoms can store a tremendous amount of pressure, a tremendous amount of repulsive energy, by just being arranged in the proper order. And that the energy is made less dangerous, less disruptive, and is organized in a sense by having an organized pattern. And by organizing the flow of the energy, the atom becomes stable. And that if you create some disorganization, you break the pattern, that the system will collapse and the real energy of the atom will be revealed, and you'll have a nuclear bomb. It's not hidden. It's not potential. It's not in some different form. I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but I'm saying it too slowly, so, and I haven't read it. I didn't draw anything, so. But yeah, I mean, you could just make the argument that all this energy, and some physicists will say this. I mean, all you can do is tap sources of energy. You can't make energy. You can only steal it. So we steal it, hydroelectric. We steal the energy that the Earth has, and it's the convection and the fact that the water flows in the atmosphere, and we can take advantage of that. And gravity, I would argue, is the same kind of stream idea. We can tap the stream of gravity, but you obviously can't tap it if you're moving in the stream. So you have to find some place to stand where you're not moving in the stream to be able to stick your hand in the stream. Yeah, the water wheel doesn't work if you don't tie it down. If the water wheel is allowed to just move with the water, it can't spin. Electrons and protons is made up of these two kinds. Alright, so just pointing out how the simple little, two kinds of force, two kinds of matter bits, two kinds of interactions completely explains how electrons and protons and charge creates atoms. It's a almost beautiful explanation. No magic, there's a strong force that we don't know where it comes from or how it does it, but it pushes protons together. No magical event. Alright, so all you're doing when you break an atom, so this would be called something like, we have a name for this. Yeah, so I found that word somewhere in some paper somewhere, the deuteron. When you have a proton, an electron, and a proton. And obviously I would argue that's a substantially interesting relationship in terms of the fact that the electron is essentially in a completely altered reality where it's in between two things that make the rest of the universe invisible from those perspectives. So it sees the universe up and down and left and right, but it doesn't see it forward and back, that kind of idea. Okay. Yeah, that didn't work. Seeking. Will it find? Changing in a sense. You could think of it as magnet or something, but it's just switching that polarity and that. Right, so just kind of pointing out that you can just sort of imagine if I have electrons on the outside and they're in different positions, that in all the positions where there is no electron, I'm going to see the nucleus. And I'm going to see that it's net positive. So I'm going to have a circumstance where, depending on how I turn the atom, it's going to become a negative ion or a positive ion, negative ion, positive ion. I can change what it looks like as a charge just by rotating it, because it has polarity. And the polarity isn't in, necessarily in just one dimension. The polarity can be multiple poles, and so you're going to have more than one. It could be north, north, and north, and then south, south, and south. It can have more than one orientation of polarity. So it can change its polarity just by turning a half turn. Kind of thing. Yeah, that video isn't loading too fast, so, it's the end anyway. So I did a video on Arbor Scientific about gyroscopes, and, I don't know if I need to play that. Just visit. The simple argument is you're just looking for how the gyroscope transmits information to the environment. So it's going to make things happen. It's going to make the stick stuck in between the gyroscope do things. And you can simply understand, well, how does it do that? Well, it has to communicate it, and the only way to communicate it is through the bearing, through the contact point. And what's controlling the contact of the bearing? Friction. What's controlling where the friction hits the bearing? Gravity. And so that's all it's doing. Gravity will tell you where what direction you're going to lose energy in, and what direction things are going to turn. And again, it can be logically understood. It doesn't have to remain mysterious and strange. You can just connect the dots, follow the moving matter, and get the right answers. Alright, the last video was more on the Faraday paradox, and this gets to the right-hand rule, gets to Lenz's law, gets to how induction really works, and I guess the biggest takeaway in terms of my argument would be is what's really not understood is the difference between a line of force, that is how objects excrete or how they collect force, which is in the form of rays, like sunlight, that's straight lines radiating from objects. Those are the lines of force. The field lines are like where the Earth ends up in an orbit. The field lines are just a circumstance where you've balanced the forces, and based on the spherical dynamics, and so there's no energy pushing the Earth in its orbit. The Earth has a velocity coming in, okay, and there's nothing moving on the field line the Earth is traveling, the orbit. There's nothing forcing it to move in one direction or forcing it to go in another direction or doing any of that. There's no built-in circumstance. There's just the circumstance of how the Earth became an orbiting thing, and whether it was ejected or whether it came in, okay. And in both cases it had to be interacted with to sustain an orbit. I mean, all these things where they just cheat. I mean, I did notice the other day that there's a crappy gravity video where a guy takes spandex and makes, a gravity well, and I think it has like 300 million views now or something. I mean, an insane number. Or 30 million, well, whatever. It's just, just this huge, and you're saying it's such a lie, it's such a distortion, because it's not showing the truth. It shows you that you drop something in and it goes into an orbit. Doesn't happen that way. If you really drop something into a gravity well, it will leave with the same velocity you inject it with. There's no way to inject it without it leaving with the same velocity unless it hits something. It has to hit something, or it goes down the well, or it leaves the well if it doesn't interact with something. Those are the energy rules. And showing how gravity is created by using gravity to create your simulator is just such a cheat. And the whole idea of doing it in this two-dimensional way, when gravity's a three-dimensional phenomenon. There's no bent fabric because it's happening at every single line. And there's no orientation that allows for bending of a fabric. It's a vacuum cleaner, okay? It's pulling constantly, if you want to think of it in those terms. And the simple solution to that silly pulling argument is to recognize, no, it's a pushing argument. The Earth and the Sun and the Moon, everything is being compressed into its circumstance. It's being pushed into a little ball. And it's not an infinitely small little ball. There's an end to what gravity can produce as an effect. It's not an infinite well of pressure. Well, so many bad arguments. Physics is just so it's not smart. And it's not smart because it's not careful. It wasn't done thoughtfully. It wasn't done in an environment where it was tested. I mean, all the rules were broken to getting right answers. This isn't how you get right answers. This is how you make a religion. They followed the how do we make it into a religion guidelines rather than the what's the best way to make sure our explanation of reality is the truth. And they didn't do that. They didn't follow that book or those guidelines. The scientific method, they just talk the talk, they don't walk the walk. 300 years they've been saying it takes 4 times more energy to go twice as fast. And in 300 years they can't show you one experiment demonstrating it. They say the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour has twice as much energy as the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. They never tied a rope to them. They never did anything to see if that actually is a fact. That the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour actually can do more work. That if I put a generator on its wheels, it'll make more photons. It'll create more electricity. It'll turn a water wheel more. They've never tested any of it. Okay. I mean, that is just the giveaway. It has to be admitted. No, they don't test anything. They never redid the Eddington experiment. 400 times better viewing resolution from space. I can't even explain to you what it would be like to have eyesight that was 400 times. You could see 400 times more pixels. You could see 400 times more detail. Could you just imagine twice? Seeing twice as good would be gigantic. 400 times better? And they never did the experiment from space? It takes 5 minutes to do it from space. No eclipse required. 5 minutes. And they've never done it. Come on. Why is that credible physics? Why do you believe people who don't think they need to do these experiments? Shit. Anyway. I mean, you're all just flat earthers. I mean, you really are as bad. You just don't care about details or the truth. You just keep reciting. You know, in spite of, somebody could argue, Newton never said F equals ma. You just don't care. You'll just keep saying F equals ma is Newton's formula when it's not. I mean, you'll just keep propagating the lies. It doesn't matter how many times somebody says, well, why don't you prove it's the most proven theory? Show me something you proved. Show me something you predicted. You know. Instead, they just keep saying it's the most predictive theory in the history of mankind. It's the most proven. It's the most bullshit it is. Yeah. Anyway. All right. So enough of the video. So this has been. Yeah, I didn't draw anything. Cool. A draftphysics.com and debatephysics.com also. Video presentation. So I'll leave you with a little bit of Professor Lewin. Yes, this little short version.
As joules, nature can deal with kinetic energy one way or another, not finagle momentum. So it must give.
All right, so till the next time and such.